Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of StreamTime Sports. I'm your host Nick Meacham and thrilled to be joined by my next two guests to talk about an area that I've been spending a lot of time talking in and around the monetization of content. But really the next phase and stage of what I want to be doing on this podcast is talking much more about the advertising game. Sports has always been so enamored with building lovely paywalled destinations for fans to come to, and turned out it's really hard to drive audiences to those platforms and make it generate the income and returns that it can. So over the next few episodes, including this one, we're going to be spending a lot more time digging into that business and that technology that's backing all that in a lot more detail to get under the hood of it all and what it means for those who are producing live sports content. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome my two guests. Paul Gleb, who's the Senior Director at North America for the Head of Media Activation and Investment at Bayer. Is it Bayer, Paul, or Bayer? Because I've heard different versions depending on where you are in the world.
It is both. If you're in Europe, it is Bayer, and if you're in the United States, it is Bayer.
Good stuff. Well, for those that are based in Europe, Bayer is I believe a German brand, if I'm not mistaken, or is it Dutch?
A German, headquartered in Germany and Switzerland.
Yeah, and very famously one of the major sponsors of a Bundesliga team, and maybe even they have the name in the brand, if I'm not mistaken. I should have prepped for that, but it only just came to me mid sentence when I was talking to you, Paul. But anyway, welcome to the podcast. And Scott Young, who is the co-founder and chief product officer at Transmit Live. Scott, good to see you again. Obviously, we caught up a little bit over 2 months ago in New York, where you were on center stage at our event in New York. So good to have you on the show and helping us, I guess, work through this topic a little bit further.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And also thanks for teaching me something new. I did not know about the international pronunciation of Bayer, given my North American centric point of view. So thank you. I think just framing up this conversation and talking about how our ad products and technology fit into the broader ecosystem of the problems we're solving and everything like that, I think it's just important to look at the history a little bit and through the lens of how we look at things. I think where we're at in an industry, and from my personal recollection, the first major live streaming sports production over the internet that I could remember is CBS March Madness on Demand that occurred in about 2006. Coincidentally or not coincidentally, myself and my co-founders were actually working at CBS at that time to bring that product to market. Now, that was 2006. That really has not been that long in the state of streaming. If you consider that 80 years ago was the first time that we actually inserted an ad on a television set, or inserted being a word that didn't even exist then for when it came to ad products. Between then and now, that 2006 and now, really the industry has really just focused on how do we build the tools and solutions so things don't break. We want to have our streams run smoothly. We don't want things to break. And yes, we want to potentially insert ads into those streams as we did in television. Just take the standard ad pod model and convert that over to digital streaming. I think now we're entering an exciting time. It's been 14 years and things are not breaking as much. Now is the time where we could really think about innovation and viewer experience being paramount, front and center. And I think those are more important topics right now because, as you mentioned earlier, the cost of media rights are growing exponentially. And as a media operator, you really need to figure out how you can better monetize your content in a really meaningful way that does not decline your viewership and your audience. So trying to balance the ability to maximize your revenue potential without really disrupting the viewer. So balancing the viewer experience. And that is what our technology is focused on doing, and working with brands and working with media rights holders to do that most effectively.
And so, Paul, over to you, just to set the scene. Talk about Bayer and its role in the ad space and indeed the sports broadcasting market.
Sure. So take a step back. I've been fortunate enough to work at top companies from the ad buying side, from the publisher monetization ad technology side of things. And most recently, I was at Bayer for 6 years, where I led all of their media ad buying as well as investment decisions on where we'd spend our money, who we'd partner with, our CTV upfronts, et cetera. I'm actually about to and have just recently launched my new company, which is a consultancy and agency, where I'll be helping other marketers bring these capabilities in-house, buy in a more sophisticated way to keep up with the changes in the media ecosystem. But I've had a long career really in all the hot spots that have change and transformation in the media industry, both in terms of how it's bought, what marketers want to do and can do, and what is being offered by publishers.
It's an interesting topic, I think, just to dig into, just to set the scene again for those that are listening. We have a very international audience here. And one of the interesting things when you're in markets like Europe in particular, the notion of advertising in streaming is really early stage still in terms of that major investment from media buyers. But obviously, Paul, from your perspective, could you just paint a little bit of the picture of how that looks from a North American standpoint? Just where does that money flow, or where are you really looking at when you're looking at opportunities investing in ad buying?
So if you look historically, television has always been a media channel where brands have looked to break through at scale with an audience. From the 60s all the way through the 90s, you could reach just enormous audiences in effective ways where people were paying attention. Now, over time, we have seen in linear TV, those audiences decline as we've seen a fracturing of media audiences. We've seen the social media platforms with their addictive algorithms pull attention away. And we've seen most recently a big shift to streaming television from linear, where 40% of viewership, going on 50% if you, depending on how you calculate it, are now watching TV through streaming services. So it's been a huge shift and transformation from what was really the top channel for marketers looking to break through with a new message, gain that attention, and do it at scale in this market.
We'll talk a little bit more about how you manage that transition internally to get everyone on board with that. I think is always an interesting part when you're trying to shift the way an organization invests in. But Scott, over to you. Just talk about somehow the ways that you're really focused on changing the way ads are served in live sports. Because one of the challenges has been for a while now is what your points are a little bit earlier when you were setting the scene, is it's taken longer than expected, perhaps, in some people's views as an industry to get to today where we can now start really being much more creative and innovative with what we're doing with the live sports experience and advertising other than what we have been doing to this point. So just what are some of those things you're changing on the delivery side?
Yeah. So I think it comes down to, now the technology is there and stable, and it's really just a matter of how people access content. And that'll continue, obviously, to go towards digital streaming. What digital streaming provides advertisers and ad technology is it provides you a more flexible and controlled manner in which you could reach audiences, the way you can reach them, the type of creative you can produce and deploy to reach them. Where our technology focuses on is that innovative experience of how you can connect with that audience in stream, in a live program, in VOD programming. So we are focused on innovating the creative format, being able to determine in what moments outside of the traditional ad pod break, where you just don't cut to a long duration advertising experience, how you can engage with those viewers in a moment of gameplay where you could make the most meaningful impact, but also how you could not take them away from the viewing experience, and you could almost enhance that experience with advertising. So just a quick example would be right after a big goal is scored, you're having a celebration, you're having a replay, there's a lull in action, and that's an opportunity for our technology to deploy targeted advertisements without taking the viewer outside of what they're watching, with appropriate messaging that's relevant to the experience they're watching and to the individual. So personalizing that experience for each individual. So everyone watching that game at that time in that moment might be seeing entirely different ads, but they're not being taken away from the stream, and they're seeing ads that are most relevant to them. And the ads could even be talking about the context of what they're watching. And that's what our technology allows them to do.
And Paul, the example that Scott gave is a really interesting one about really providing an advertisement experience that is not impacting in a negative way, like perhaps the perception was originally at sort of the start of this new era of streaming, where everyone's so fearful that ads are going to send people away from platforms. And then we worked out, actually, you know what? It hasn't really had that impact at all. With some of the examples that Scott just gave, what ways are you looking to measure success in using those types of techniques and innovations around, say, streaming served advertisements versus the traditional model?
Yeah, so we are able to scale that spend, which makes a big difference on this channel, in that you could actually track and measure people who have actually been that audience and been exposed to that ad really effectively and accurately, versus when you have linear, you're doing this sort of correlation analysis. And it's not always as easy, particularly as audiences have declined, to accurately understand the particular impact that linear TV opportunity has and spend has delivered. But once you transfer into a digital environment, the opportunity for you to understand that specific channel and tactic and the impact it's had goes up significantly, from multi-touch attribution to just more cuts and accurate marketing mix and correlation than you would have from a broadcast. So for us, the ability also to work with Transmit and have that spend go over a longer period of time, numerous sports cut in, more scaled audience than just one individual sports event or channel, it allows us to get a much better read on this tactic, which is a huge advantage for us. So we could optimize and know what works and what doesn't. And what we found is that you're always in digital now, and most marketing need to get that audience right so that you have that relevancy, so they actually pay attention to that ad. The second part is getting that creative right, and can be very tricky to do consistently. But people are so engaged and leaning in and watching that the requirements of creative is not as significant. You could be more consistently successful because they're already watching and paying attention to the game. And like Scott said, there are all these opportunities for you to actually have the context deliver the message for you in a really engaging ways. We even talked about one time for digestive health type products, laxatives or probiotics, where if the other team hit a game-winning home run, or there's a penalty on your team in hockey or a yellow card in soccer, football, being able to put something up there that resonates with the topic that you are talking about. There's stuff with close games that get your heart health risk up in the heart beating. There's lots of research that actually there's increased heart events during those time periods. So deliver that message in that tense sport event. It's doing so much of that work that you don't have to always get that creative right, because the context they provided does it for you.
And just to double down on something Paul said when he talked about measurement, I think that gets lost a lot when we talk about all these creative tactics that we can deploy. But I think before you even get to all the interesting and niche things that you can do within your creative, the most important thing is that it's measurable at scale. So it's measured by industry standard third parties. That's like your baseline. So at least who you exposed, what viewership you garnered, and that you're not even having general message waste. And when you get to these unique advertising opportunities that exist outside of that traditional format, sometimes with other tactics that gets lost. Like when something is burned into a stream, like where every viewer sees the same ad in that stream. By us offering this dynamic platform that connects to the broader ad tech ecosystem, it can be measured by the same standards that all advertisers and broadcasters use to leverage their currency as the means for addressing an audience and selling that to brand advertisers, and also to prove and show measurable impact at scale. So then when it comes down to your decisions about creative, that's where you can have fun with it and get really as detailed as you want. But if you don't want to, it's just another scalable deployment to capture audience attention.
So we're talking a lot about the benefits of ads and the fact that streaming can give you a whole new, say, playbook, I suppose, with regards to how you can make ads work for the advertisers in this instance. I alluded to it before earlier, but Scott, obviously you guys are right at the forefront of how impactful ads can be on the streaming experience. And I mentioned before about the fact that most sports has been historically built around building a subs-led approach and experience. Just what's your thoughts on benefits of taking that ad-led approach? What are some of the things that has enabled that you guys are seeing that doesn't exist through the traditional or the older model of just subs alone, which is now almost out of date across the industry, depending on particularly at the bigger media end of it?
Yeah, I think that's been a big challenge that's plagued the industry because, as far as like the trends that, we were talking about earlier, 2006 essentially streaming at scale launched, right? And then everyone hammered in our subscription model. We're scared of losing our revenue from cable. So we need subs, and they do, and they still do. But there is a way where those two things can work together: ad-supported streaming plus subscription model. And obviously, we've been seeing different types of tiers and plans come out to market by various media operator and MVPD providers. But I think there's a great way that this can work together, because if you have one model that, you're still taking advantage of subscriptions, but you're still capitalizing on ad-supported streaming, I think that's one of the main benefits that we deploy by creating this, canvas that can support non-standard ad experiences that don't take the viewer outside of what they're watching, because now you can have your subscription model plus a premium viewer experience that includes ads. So you're not taking away from either, and you could really maximize your revenue potential.
I would just say that there's been no media in history that hasn't eventually had to monetize with multiple revenue streams. These leagues and whoever's creating this content, particularly when it's the most valuable and scarce content out there. If you look at what is continuing to drive scale, viewership, sports is unique. So the leagues and the owners of that content are going to want to have continually more and more revenue generated from that, which means if you are licensing those rights or if you're involved with it, you have to find new ways to deliver growth in revenue off of that asset. And you look back as far as Disney, from their content plans, they developed a movie or a content. You had an ad-supported model, you had a paid in-theater model, you had an amusement park, you had merchandise. Everywhere you look, whether it's Netflix now is doing that. You look at newspapers and other journalists, they have conferences, they have paid members only, they have communities, they have ad-supported. All of it has to be there in order to hit that monetization growth in the media environment today. And eventually the largest, in most cases, is the ad-supported model in terms of what you can do, particularly now in digital with audiences and targeting and the effectiveness that you can deliver.
Yeah, and Paul brings up a good point, and that just leads me to believe, and please, Paul, tell me if I'm speaking out of turn here, but when I think about why the upfronts exist right now, it's just the futures market for sports. That's really what drives it. Everything else is, okay, do I really care about my pod position within this new slate of programming that's coming up with full episodic streaming? I don't think so. I think it's really sports that drives the futures market. Everything else can be scatter eventually, but how are you going to secure your premium sponsorship positions? And that's what sports is. And that's kind of like what we're creating here, is new opportunities to do that and maximize that value.
Yeah, that is the premium real estate, because other audience sizes have shrunk to a point where if you have to assemble them all together, you have to deliver such a high frequency that you have a waste in your investment. You wind up annoying the audience to a certain extent. But in terms of the scaled audience at a specific time, not having to worry about deliver and manage too much frequency, live sports is predominantly what the upfronts are about now. It's the one opportunity for you to deliver that. Now, there might be exceptions here and there and things that take off, but nothing like it used to be even 5 years ago, let alone 10 or 15 or 20.
Paul, just an interesting point that you've raised around those and you as well, Scott, around those sort of premium moments, right, that advertisers are looking for. Why are they looking for those moments? Why, and this might be a silly question, but why aren't you just looking to spread that money across very general programmatic activity? How make sure the brand's visible in lots of places? Why do those premium moments, peak moments, those appointment to view moments really matter for an advertiser to drive audiences to and have that association with a brand?
There's two key levers. You want to really break it down to the most simplest components of marketing. And one is breaking through with messaging that really requires a lot of attention. When you have a new message, a new product, a new brand, there's another component, which is staying top of mind. Both are important. So there are things that marketers are doing to build that top of mind over time, reaching a person with the right frequency at scale with your audience over a longer period of time. But if you weren't in mind to begin with, it's hard to stay top of mind. And so there are only a few opportunities now, and fewer with all those distractions to truly break through with a message. And being in the middle of the last 2 minutes and someone going to the free throw line in the NBA are those moments where everyone's watching and you know that that message is being seen, being paid attention to. It's not that night where you sat with your wife, your husband, your partner, and you try to find something to watch and you don't even pick something because you're scrolling through your phones or on an e-commerce site. It's not where you put something that is sort of background TV and you wake up, or you look at each other an hour later and you realize neither one of you is watching the show and you were scrolling. This is tune in, pay attention time where that message is breaking through.
Yeah, and we've seen that done in really great fashion by working with Paul in a number of brands. But then also an example I like to use is what we've seen done in Yankees games is post home run graphic ad insertion, targeted ad insertion. What we're doing from a technical perspective, we're able to send up signals to the advertiser's technology platform that they're using to deliver ads. Those signals can specify even down to who hit the home run. It's a person that can specify team, anything. So when you're doing that on something like the Yes Network, when it's a home team audience, you're speaking to a home team audience that's passionate about the Yankees. This was, let's say, particularly Red Sox Yankees event. Now, FanDuel did a great job of developing a varying creatives based off of players that potentially hit home runs or based off of the teams that hit home runs. So they would speak to the fan differently when they were watching a post event of a home run from a Yankees, where they would celebrate that and they would throw some digs at Boston. But then when Boston hit the home run, they would commiserate with the Yankee fan saying, hey, at least you don't have to live in Boston. Something like that, So that really triggers a lot of positive sentiment from the viewer. And, talk about remembering. You're remembering like one of the most memorable events of that day or of that week in sports. Now you're going to associate that with the brand in a really meaningful way. So take that to, the EU and looking at soccer. I mean, the amount of passion that those fans have and being able to pull those triggers is really a tremendous opportunity, and one that we're really excited to bring to market.
Yeah, I would add that as rare as just those moments are to break through with a message, it's even more uncommon to do that at scale. And working with Transmit as a platform that is across various different sports. It could be where I'm reaching someone who's watching volleyball to tennis, which might be a much lower or smaller audience than you would see in Yankees, Red Sox, or Premier League. It could be curling, it could be darts. If someone's watching a sport, they're still passionate about that specific sport. And I know that I'm in front of them while they're watching and leaned into that, but I could do it now at scale all year round across all those sports. Not just in one specific event or sport or time period.
That's it. That's an interesting explanation on that point. Now, moving to, I guess, the notion of there's different types of advertising now we can run in ads. And you guys have already given a snapshot of the different ways you can be visible at different moments. And Scott, it really comes through as this ability to be, whether it's, I don't know if personalized is the right word, but very selective at how you can create the perfect moment to serve advertising. I still think that is largely misunderstood or not understood by the industry about how targeted you can be. And it leads to the next great sort of question I wanted to ask. The next great question is probably not the right word. The next question I wanted to ask, which is a great question I think for the industry generally, is about how do you drive more premium value out of your ad revenue? Because one of the things that notions with sports has been, well, running an ad-led model is great, but I can never drive the returns from running an ad-led model that I can from subscription. Now, but when we start talking about this selectiveness, this personalization, I feel now we're getting to a point now where that might not be as big a gap as what people might believe or have experienced. Can you just give us a bit of a sense of that, Scott, as to what are some of those premium opportunities that are really driving returns for people broadcasting live sport?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about moment-led advertising, and then what Paul brought up is how you can really do that at scale. A lot of these providers are streaming large volume of live sports. Some of the partners we work with, do upwards of 50 to 80,000 live streams on a yearly basis. So once you really start grouping together all those potential moments of new revenue opportunities that can exist inside of the stream, and then you also have a value chain about certain moments are more impactful and will carry a higher price. And I think you can start driving greater yield out of your advertising inventory and your content, your return on investment from your content ROI by valuing certain moments at a much higher premium than some of your other ad products. It doesn't make everything else less valuable, but at least now you have tiers of how you can drive exponential revenue returns off of these scarce moments of time. And then the advertising market starts competing for the space in those moments, and it drives the price even further. So I think we are at the very early inning of even thinking about how that works, but that's really the general idea.
And I would add, if you are a marketer of any size too, this opens the door to have that measurement and for you to actually see the value and the return on investment from D2C companies that have now entered the space in CTV and are spending a considerable amount. It doesn't just have to be the big telcos and some of the marketing categories that you saw predominantly in linear the past few years. As measurability declined, you just weren't able to spend enough and get enough scale to get measurement to know this value. But one of the great things about CTV and as well just the performance that we're seeing with Transmit, you see the performance, and more marketers with more and more tactics and more budget sizes are able to see it and then compete for that inventory.
Mm. So given your media buying background, Paul, and all the things and benefits we've been talking about with regards to what streaming can bring from an advertising perspective, let's flip it a little bit. We'll talk about some of the challenges that you're still seeing from your lens as to what media buyers face when looking to invest into the streaming space, because we are still, it feels like from what I see, where I sit, that we're still in a maturation phase of investment in this space. It's not like this is peaked space, right?
No, but I think we've seen it, the investment double year over year again and again. And we're seeing that there is a significant amount of usage and behavior shift that we haven't really seen in media in a long time. And that was partially driven by COVID, which is a big accelerator of people shifting behaviors in all different types of places, but specifically towards CTV and those services, and watching live sports and coming together in those sort of events. And so our pursuit of live sports inventory require us to, one, not just buy in linear, but to go to CTV, and then also make sure that we were tapping into regional sports opportunities. It wasn't just the national NFL. If we really want to do this at scale across 14 brands, always on, we needed to open up and be able to buy against all types of inventory and media opportunities. Now, these regional sports providers, as they were shifting to CTV, they don't have the resources and everything set up in terms of allowing us to buy at scale, forecasting how much we could spend, allowing us to make a commitment, and then delivering that budget. So what Transmit has done is it really made it a lot easier for us to address that challenge and buy on these regional sports platforms. One, if you don't want to negotiate with 8 or 10 different regional sports counterparts, you could just work with Transmit. That allows us to do this operation a lot more efficiently. The second part is that forecasting, when you have less inventory and data to go off of, is harder for a regional provider. But this creates a whole new segment of inventory. So if we're under delivering those 15s and 30s in the pod, now suddenly we've added this whole new package of inventory that's really effective, that can help us hit our spend and delivery and the reach that we need in order to deliver on the results that we're looking to have.
And that point about fragmentation across the boards and being kind of a connective tissue there is something we're really focused on. I think another thing that we've been seeing is just who ends up becoming the media rights holders and the media operators, the streaming platforms of where people go to watch. That's just going to continue to fragment. I know we all hear about what Amazon's doing, what Apple's doing, and obviously the conglomerate broadcasters getting together and trying to fight the battle collectively. But some interesting trends that I've seen is just before this call, I was talking to a former NFL linebacker who just launched his own streaming platform, and we're going to start working with him. And he just launched this a few weeks ago, and he has significant traffic across the content that he's streaming. So now he's a player in the media space, overnight. So I think we'll see more things like that coming to market as well, to even further fragment it and create more complexity.
Yeah. I'd say creative is probably another issue as we go to new formats and all these new opportunities of context, of different audiences, of different moments that we didn't have before. It's a great opportunity, but it's a challenge to figure out how to do that right, how to put that into your production budget. So we have found that networks as well as Transmit has helped out with producing some of that as part of the relationship and the deal, and really making sure that we're following best practices. What has been learned about these moments that works are being incorporated, but also helping us test new things that we can do based on what we're trying to achieve, what the message is, and what the brand is all about.
So Scott, just you said a bit of a scene there about your relationship with a linebacker in the NFL, which I think is an interesting way to sort of talk about the different types of broadcasting partners you are actually able to work with. Because I think sometimes when we're having this discussion around advertising, the initial reaction to people might be, "Oh, we're only talking about the big streaming players and the big networks." Just talk us through the scale of who can actually use not only what you guys do, but indeed use that to open up the door to serious advertising revenue.
Yeah, that's a good point because, obviously we work with a lot of the larger broadcasters, but I think it's really interesting the trends we're seeing from like the tier two sports, those rights that maybe were less competitive, but still have a niche audience independently, like players like Flow Sports. And then, we're seeing broader football or soccer rights come up from that tier two level, and they're starting to see scale. I think the benefit of working with us, and we absolutely love to partner with the emergent platforms because they can plug us in from day one and begin to monetize their content immediately while they build scale, because we're aggregating inventory supply through the unique process that we do of creating these new in-stream formats to our demand marketplace that can just plug in and monetize seamlessly. So these guys don't have to worry about building out their direct sales teams or worrying about their broader ad technology stack, while they really just focus on that one thing they need to do, which is driving traffic, building a good viewer experience, and achieving the content rights objectives that they have.
Paul, so bringing it back to, you've set the scene earlier with regards to the role that TV, traditional linear broadcasting OTA, has played in advertising for some time. And you've set the scene on how more personalized the experience can be for users and how much more targeted it can be. Are there any other aspects that are making it really clear about the effectiveness of what taking more targeted streaming approach can take towards the traditional approaches that have historically been in place over from what your experience has been with media buying to date?
Absolutely. There are always going to be certain segments of the population that will never be interested or be in the market for your product, unless it's toilet paper, toothbrushes, some of the things that is 100% penetration. In most instances, not having to waste your budget on that and to have a little bit more targeting of reaching those that could possibly be in that market or be convinced that this is the right solution for it, being more aware of that problem that they actually do have. Those are savings that you need to have in efficiency, and you can't have in terms of waste when you're thinking about your budget and optimizing how you're going to spend those investments. And that's been across every digital platform. Now, you don't have to be as relevant in certain instances. So you don't have to do micro audiences that are just so tiny where you might have to do that on other platforms. Here, because you have that engagement, the format, the attention, you could have a little bit of a broader audience and still convert the same amount of people without having to be as targeted. But we found no matter what, there is a sweet spot, and there needs to be some sort of targeting in almost every case as a marketer. If you want to be efficient, if you want to get that return on investment and not have your costs blow up because of the waste, you need to be thoughtful about your conversion rate and how much targeting you're doing.
So back with when you're looking at where you're spending money, how crucial then is like real-time data playing a role? Are you planning everything out and then you'll look at it afterwards, or are you trying to do things in real time and making decisions on how effective your advertising is? How real time are you working?
It depends on the tactic and what we're doing. There's stuff when we're buying social media and display and commerce media that is very direct response, where it's very iterative, and we have traders hands on keyboard buying and optimizing on an ongoing basis, and we get those results. There are larger efforts behind certain initiatives that are these tent poles where it's a little bit of a longer of a cycle in terms of measurement and the changes that we are doing, but we are measuring and trying to get better over time. And some of those are these higher impact, or we're being more thoughtful and we're having it run. And then we're seeing some of the longer term and midterm as well as short term impact on it. And that is these sort of events. It's also when we work with, let's say, MSG Network, which broadcasts 5 hockey teams, including the Rangers that are in the playoffs now, the Knicks. We sponsored their D2C app and offering for the MSG Network. And that was something that we didn't just optimize over time. There was certain spend there where we gained those results over time that were in those 15, 30 breaks, but we had our branding all around the launch of the app and the promotion that they were sending out. We had at a home, we had live mentions of the sponsorship and the partnership. So you had all those sort of things that are put together, and then we would evaluate after the season, and we would look at how we're going to do those sort of sponsorships better over X number of regional next year. So again, it depends on what you're doing, what you can actually optimize, and what you may want to optimize in terms of a cadence.
And as a technology provider, when you talk about real-time data, there's at a more rudimentary level, real-time data is used in every ad decision that is made. So just to bring it down to a more simplified level, because we have to have the ability to process real-time data about who's watching in that moment and then offer that to advertisers' decisioning engines about what ads they want to place where. So there is a lot of transfer of real-time data happening on an ongoing basis without a human even knowing it's happening, because every decision of how to insert an ad, even the most unique and innovative ad experiences we produce, they're deciding real time in that moment while something's live, and our system is making that happen and deliver to that viewer. So there's limited message waste.
So we've talked a little bit about some of the premium nature of advertising you can now serve in streaming. Just, Scott, what do you see that doing for, I guess, the dynamic between brands and sports currently? Do you see it making a change in the approach that perhaps brands might have taken through traditional means, whether it be through traditional TV deals or sponsorship deals, and having more of a measurable, a sort of a transformational way in how they look to invest in or around the live sports experience?
Yeah, I think it opens up new ways that they can approach and think about it, especially in terms of their sponsorship opportunities. I think one thing it does is, you're always going to have your corporate sponsors for any individual sporting event. But I think what this does is it even provides a more efficient layer, because now you can have these personalized sponsorship moments, rather than your corporate sponsors that everyone's going to see at every game. Now you have this other layer of reserved inventory that you could distribute and integrate into a variety of the sporting events, where to that one individual viewer, you are going to seem like a sponsor of that program in that moment, but not to every viewer. So you're getting that time with that person. They're going to think you're the sponsor, but you don't have to be this corporate sponsor. So it provides an even more efficient and scalable way to deploy advertising tactics, in my opinion.
And Paul, a similar sort of question to you. Do you see it making any real changes in the way brands are investing in and around sports now? It feels like it's opening up so much more opportunity. I mean, there's obviously different layers of a marketing and advertising mix you're looking to achieve, from top of the funnel to bottom of the funnel sort of activity. Do you think this could really change the way people are looking at how they're investing, particularly around digital and digital sponsorship?
Absolutely. There were 14 brands that I managed over at Bayer. So it's not just the aspirin. It's across all different categories. And then most of them were not able to buy on linear TV sports. It was too expensive for them to buy it on a per commercial linear way. But we actually had 3 brands that had never bought TV before buying women's WNBA basketball inventory in the playoffs, because we could actually buy in these first snippets, reach this audience, and that is across all of CTV. I think there are other brands that might be a small product launch. We want to gain attention, where suddenly we now have Transmit 2, where we, in a manageable total budget way, are able to get that high impact to that right audience, where I couldn't have done that on linear to be the Sunday sponsor of the NFL or Saturday sponsor of Premier League, where everyone gets that. The total budget would have taken me out of that. This really opens up opportunities for many more participants, which puts a lot more dollars into this channel.
Interesting. I mean, look, from what I've learned so far, it feels like looking at further afield outside of the US, one of the challenges, whilst we've seen a lot of growth in the US with regards to media rights revenue, particularly at the premium top tier sports properties, there has been a real flattening of media rights investment for the tier twos and below, and particularly in Europe, even the premium properties struggling to get growth in their media rights revenue. Now, it's going to take someone to take a bit of a leap of faith that integrating advertising into the live football proposition or soccer proposition could have a meaningful way of really driving up the revenue, because there's so much time, right, in things like soccer where there's no breaks to play the ads and bring that revenue opportunity to play like you do in the NFL and the NBA. And that just feels like that is the next way to really drive those revenues up again and unlock a whole new revenue stream. I mean, Scott, what's your take? Is that I'm sure I'm pretty confident you're going to agree with me to some extent, but I'm just curious that how significant do you think that really can be for, let's say, some of the major broadcasters in UK and Europe who are looking at this space at the moment?
Yeah, let's put it this way. We founded the company in 2016, and I did a presentation in London at some point and was talking to rights holders of football content. And it's actually something I didn't even realize was the case, is that there's literally virtually no advertising that's being done in the most premium content in the EU. And I was actually like floored and amazed by that because I do not know how that delivers return for those companies that pay that expense for those rights. And then even when I dug deeper into how we're handling those rights in the US, that was a problem too. They said, all right, we just get one ad break during the half. So I think the amount of opportunity that exists in live football is absolutely incredible, because you have substitution time, you have penalties, you have goals. There's so much downtime that exists within those. I mean, you even see it after the match has ended with all that extra time that they get. So you don't have to overwhelm the viewer with ads, but just putting a couple in there is going to drive the value exponentially. And I'm really excited about that opportunity.
And I think if you've watched football of late, you've noticed how many video reviews there are, and that is a lull. And for those who are used to nonstop action, if you could fill that in an engaging and entertaining way, you are basically seeing commercial breaks in the way the game is being played now, in almost every sport, inserted one way or another. So I think it just takes a little bit of creativity and where you want to do it in a seamless way, in a way that entertains and uses that time period that was formerly nothing and monetizes it.
So let's get our crystal ball out on this final question. Let's look at what are some of the key future trends we can expect to see in sports advertising that brands should be prepared for. Any examples, Paul, that you think are really going to, well, starting with you, come to life really because of this way we're now able to serve such personalized and targeted advertising in stream, in the live experience? Anything you can really expect to be a trend to see more and more of growth in, whether it be from the media buying perspective or just the experience perspective?
I just think in general, it's really going to be an enormous part of your strategy and your budgeting decisions. Live sports is going to dominate. There's going to be a big line item that you have to think about. One is you have that audience component of it. Two is that you're now able to tap into that passion, that engagement is the one thing that people love at scale, and do on-air live game ads. You have ads at the break. You have in-arena ads. You have in the markets at a home association with it. You have content year-round related to that team and related to that sport that you could be a part of. So we're only seeing increasing interest in wanting to be part of this and tap into this unique part of the media ecosystem in every way possible. And so because it's taking up that larger lever in our total marketing execution, I think it's only going to get bigger, more leverage to it, and more important.
And Scott, same question for you, really, particularly in terms of, is there anything also on a trends perspective that you guys are seeing within the platform that you're running? Are you actually seeing some definitive trends through the data of what your advertisers and indeed what your audiences are doing to engage with the content?
Yeah, I think it's really, at the first level of that is really just providing the tools to make the advertising more ingrained in the content and part of the experience. So the viewer could be getting information from that. They could actually be getting relevant purchase information, relevant to the content that they're watching. Really just making advertising more native to the experience. That's one. And then two is the synchronization of all these different types of media, because we're talking about, not just that one aspect, that in-game or in-stream opportunity, but what Paul said, in the arena. So you want to go from the real world to the virtual world to the gamified world and connecting everything together so you can create a more holistic 360 experience. I think those are the trends that we'll be seeing. But, more immediately, it's how do we engage the viewer and participate in the content rather than distracting them from the content.
Absolutely. Well, look, Paul, Scott, it's been great to have you on the podcast and shedding quite a bit of insight into the new world of streaming and advertising in streaming. Paul, just give us a shout out again to where people will be able to connect with you after this, given the new company you're launching.
Yeah, new company's name is House Effect, and you can find the company as well as me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or pg@houseeffect.com. Just feel free to reach out. Happy to chat.
Good stuff. And Scott, where can people find out a little bit more about Transmit? Because I think if people haven't been listening, if they've been listening well, they are definitely going to be intrigued to learn more about what you guys are doing around live sports. So what's the best way to get in touch and to look into what you guys do a little bit deeper?
Yeah, feel free to go to transmit.live. That's our website. You can see all the ad experiences, and feel free to shoot me an email, scott@transmit.live. Talk further.
Good stuff. That is all we've got time for. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Paul, for joining me. And look, we'll look forward to catching up in the hopefully near future and hear a little bit more about how things have evolved next time we have you on the show. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks so much.
Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as Sports Pro Nick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, Streamtimers. Until next time.